In this quick video, I will demonstrate my Blackboard courses, and I wanted to include this to show how I set Blackboard up for teaching during the pandemic and to demonstrate how I have changed some of the setup from the fall 2020 semester to the spring 2021 semester. So I will demonstrate this in the two classes that I am reteaching in the spring, Psych 100 and Psych 206. So this is my Psych 100 from the fall. I used the CIT shell, the setup, for the classes. So I preloaded all of this. It came with course materials. For this class, I used Perusal as a way for students who were not able to be in class at all, so for online-only students, to be able to interact with the hybrid material that I would present in class once a week. The class was a rotating student model, and so I saw 1/3 of the students each day of the week, although there were a chunk of students in each of my classes who chose to be online only, so they could come to Perusal, for example, and if it was chapter 1 and we were working through research methods, I created a written document for the hybrid activities. They could come in here and they could interact with the material. And I often put them into teams so that they could work together to sort of have a discussion and explain the material to each other. So that's course materials. Of course, I had an announcement section. The syllabus, I would upload sort of a user-friendly, a colorful version, and also a screen reader accessible version. I gave them contact information and a little bit about me to try to introduce myself. There was a discussion board that we used sometimes, Collaborate, grades policies, and the chunk of the material was here in course content. So the way that I organized it in the fall was I had a folder for drop boxes, a folder for exams, and then folders for all of the modules. Okay, and so if we went into a module, I posted a bit of a lesson plan, some learning objectives. In the module resources folder, they would find lecture videos, and in chapter 1, I scanned the chapter for them in case they didn't have their book yet. They would get quizzes. There was always a chapter quiz. In the chapter quiz, students could take as many times as they wanted to try to improve their grade, and it would draw different questions every time I created a test pool. It would be sort of fill in the blank and matching and short answers and multiple choice. Okay, and then I would also put the in-class discussion things here as well, so that everyone would have access to them after the week had passed. So this is how I organized in the fall. It wasn't remarkably intuitive to use this shell to me, and the students seemed to have a lot of trouble finding things as well. So in the spring, the semester that has just started, I've reorganized it a little bit. I'm not using the shell anymore. I sort of just created links or pages for the things that I think we use the most: announcements, the discussion board, the chapter content, Collaborate, attendance quizzes, syllabi and assignment sheets, papers and exams, tips for success, and of course the students, their grades. So this is my revision. In the first semester, I was attempting to create all of the content. In the second semester, I'm attempting to polish the content. And so here's an example of an announcement that went out earlier this week talking about chapter 2. So we completed chapter 1, the methods and history. of psychology chapter. And so every week, every chapter, I want to tell them if they liked this topic, here's where you could go next in psychology. So if you liked this sort of methods focus that we had in the first week, you would go to statistics, to single subject research, to research methods. There are careers that you could pursue, and then some reminders about now we're moving into chapter 2. This semester I am not doing perusal. If students wish to be online only, I am still allowing that, but we're meeting live in Collaborate so that everyone attends the hybrid session. It's no longer a rotating student model, it's the rotating classroom model. We all meet once a week, either in person or they can tune in via Collaborate and we'll do the hybrid activities together. And I changed that so that the students have a bit more of a consistent experience, whether they're in person or online only, and so that the online only students perhaps hopefully feel a bit more engaged. I also changed around how I'm presenting the material. Now that I have most of the videos that I want to use, the lecture videos that I want to use, I'm able to focus on delivering the material in Blackboard in hopefully a more appealing way. So I still have all of the chapters, sort of module by module. And you can see I've uploaded the first 4. So this is all of the material for midterm 1, for the first, all the material that will be on our first test. I'm reminding them of the due dates, I'm reminding them of the assignments, and I'm providing a little glimpse at what we'll talk about. And so here's a little bit about the history of psychology with Pavlov and with a child taking the doll test from the Clark and Clark study. If you come into the folder, again, I'm giving a bit of a lesson plan, although I'm trying to give them a little bit more detail. I'm using this bottom section, the FYI, every week to try to give them really a little bit of material from the syllabus, reminding them of something important in the class. So in this first FYI, I'm telling them to check out the syllabus, and I'm talking about how we're having in-person hybrid sessions. And I'm reminding them that material is always going to be due Tuesday at 11:59 because we meet on Wednesdays. I again provided them with a chapter. This time I didn't use subfolders. I thought it would be easier to see the things in the order that I wanted them to do them in. So here is that chapter quiz again. Here's the first lecture and a quiz, the second lecture and a quiz, the third lecture and a quiz. And then each week I'm giving them a folder with more content if they would like it. Again, because 101 changes topics drastically every week. Sorry, Psych 100 changes topics drastically every week. And sometimes students really love a given week. So if they'd like to hear, they can come in and watch the frontline film, A Class Divided. This goes with the history theme of chapter 1 here. Linking them to the website for Women in Psychology. Again, thinking about the history of psychology and trying to make it a little less male-centric. Here I link them to a research methods textbook if they would like to look more into research methods. And here is a real live example of research methods and why it is so important. This is a 3-minute long video of Dr. Fauci testifying before Congress. And he's talking about things that the students should understand the importance of after we go through a particular hybrid activity, right? The importance of a control group, the importance of randomizing, and understanding confounds. So hopefully the chapter is a little bit more appealing to students, a little bit more clearly laid out, and every week sort of has the same structure. Okay. To move into Psychology 206, which is the psychology of childhood, my fall was very similar, right? Again, I have the same setup, the same material. There would be a difference in course materials. In this book, in this class, we also used Launchpad to allow students to work through the material. This was last semester, so this course has been deactivated. But students would come into the online book, they could read the book here, and then they would be responsible for doing these assessments. To practice the material, and they could answer questions, get them wrong, answer as many as they wanted until they earned the score. In this case, they needed to get to 200. And if they get the question right the first time, it's worth more. If they get the question wrong, this amount of value that you can earn for the question goes down every time. And if we go into course content, again, I had things organized. I had an exams folder here, a papers folder, and the modules. Okay, and we can go into a module, see that there's a bit of a lesson plan. Again, there would be videos, there would be quizzes, and again, the in-class hybrid discussion materials for the students to review after the fact. I changed this course in a way to be very similar to the changes that I made in my Psych 100 class. So this is the spring semester. So here's an example of an announcement that hopefully is not a standard announcement. This is an 8 a.m. class. We actually got locked out of the classroom on our first hybrid day, and we sort of started class in the hallway using my cell phone for folks online, and it was a bit of a to-do. So, but I am reminding students again. We meet on Thursdays, we meet on Wednesdays, so this is the next day, sort of as a reminder, hey, we're going to move into a new chunk of material here. Remember that this material is going to be due next Tuesday, and some reminders about some things on Blackboard. If we go into our chapter modules, I'm doing the same thing here as well, where I'm attempting to make the material accessible, make it look interesting. Students can come in and see an expanded lesson plan where I'm sort of clearly laying out, hopefully, what it is I want them to learn, what they're going to watch, what they're responsible for, and again, some information every time. And again, you can see the hybrid material here after the fact. Students can come back and visit that activity and that information. So I wanted to show you a couple more things. Let's see, under papers and exams, I gave this its own section this time. I did not like having it, I think, in the fall, buried under the chapter content, under the course content. I want it to have its own folder, its own area. So if you come into papers and exams, there are no exams yet because we're at the very beginning of the semester. When we start, I will put a folder up top with exams in it. It will have the midterms and the final. But for right now, there are just papers. And I'm trying to provide them with resources. So first, I give them example papers. So here's an example of a child observation that was very well done. Here's an example of a Gopnik reflection paper that similarly was very well done. It was an A caliber paper. So these are assignments that the students will be doing throughout the semester, although I changed my prompts. I'm offering a series of child observations. There are 4 of those offered and 4 Gopniks. I'm not asking them to observe real live children unless they have some available in their life, if they live with a child or if they can video call a niece or a nephew. Otherwise, I'm allowing them to find videos of children online, or I'm presenting them with videos of my children, for better or for worse. I try to catch my kids and upload them so that the students can use them as an observation tool if they'd like. And then I've got the papers all laid out here in order of the due date. So there's 8 of these. There's 4 child observations and 4 Gopnik reflections, They're both meant to be short, repetitive assignments so that the students have low stakes testing opportunities and that they can learn and improve as they continue to write in this series of papers. This semester they are allowed to pick 5 out of the 8 papers. So they're all here, the prompts are here. There's also a section this semester called Tips for Success that I will be adding to as we go through the semester. So I do have a TA this semester, a student who performed very well in the fall, and so she has prepared this PowerPoint document that she has narrated over about how she was successful in this course, giving the students tips. I've also presented or prepared a short video on how they can format an APA cover page, how to find an empirical source, and I'll continue to upload sort of short help videos about things that often trip students up. And then the last thing I wanted to do in this video was provide a quick demonstration of what a lecture would look like. And we'll go into biology. So this is the second topic that we do in child development. Gene-environment interaction. And so we have one more topic that I want to talk about, which is the idea of how we think about genetics. And here are some big names who have sort of brought us to a paradigm shift. In the 2000s, particularly in the 2010s, into the 2020s. So this is like the last decade or so. We've really changed how we think about genes. We used to think about genes as risk genes, as you could have a variant of a gene that would put you at risk. That doesn't really make sense evolutionarily, because again, gene variants probably do lots of different things. And if it was really a bad variant, you would think that throughout the process of evolution, it would have weeded itself out of our genome. So why is it still here, right? If, for example, depression is like 45% heritable, and there are some gene variants that tie into depression, then why have we not just evolved those out, right? Why? It doesn't make sense when we sit back at a big level and we think about it. And so now we're going to get into the idea of susceptibility genes. And the first people to, I think, really write about this compellingly were Boyce and Ellis there. And they made a metaphor for understanding the concept of differential susceptibility using a dandelion and an orchid. And now we're back to the very start, to the top screen of this as well, that idea of that plant pushing itself through the concrete. They said, what if we think about genetics in terms of susceptibility to the environment? So for example, a dandelion is not susceptible to the environment. What does that mean? You can take a dandelion seed and you can plant it in the most rich soil and tend it and care for it, and it will grow a dandelion. Or a dandelion seed can get wedged in a piece of concrete where there's hardly any dirt, no nutrition, and cars rolling over it, and it'll still grow a dandelion. The dandelion is not remarkably susceptible, right, to the environment. It just is what it is. Whereas perhaps some genes make us susceptible. And here we can think about the orchid. Now, if you take that orchid and you plant it in the most rich soil and you take care of it, it grows this beautiful flower, this orchid. But if you put an orchid seed in a crack in the concrete and neglect it, you will not get an orchid. Perhaps this is more like how our genes work. Maybe our genes either make us susceptible to the environment we're in, or they make us not susceptible to the environment we're in. So what does this look like? Well, here's the original gene-environment interaction where genes are a risk. We sort of think about how, and diathesis literally means an inborn risk, an inborn bomb, a ticking time bomb inside people. In this model, if you're in a good environment, let's say depression, right? You have these genes for depression.
which would make you the dotted line person. But we're over here in a positive environment, everything's good. Or perhaps you don't have these risk genes for depression, but we're all good and our outcomes are positive. The diathesis stress model would say that when times get tough, when our environmental experience becomes negative, we see this difference, right? Where these folks that had the diathesis, the inborn risk, the risk gene variant, now suddenly they fail to thrive and they have this negative outcome. Whereas the folks who don't have this genetic risk or diathesis continue to do fine, right? So we have these genes for depression, and we're all well and good when life is good, but then maybe we experience like the loss of a parent. And of course, everyone's going to feel sad and grieve, but resilient people will be okay, will not dip into a lasting depression. They'll grieve, they'll be sad, but they will be okay in the end. Whereas these vulnerable folks will then experience depression and not be able to come back from this. This is the diathesis stress model. This is a very negative model, right? I mean, what are you going to do if you're born with that ticking time bomb, right? And you guys are sitting there and thinking, right? My mother has major depression, suffered from major depression for most of her life, still deals with it. Of course, if we're going with the diathesis stress model, I'm like, well, I'm probably screwed. If I inherited those genes from mom, then I'm just waiting for my moment. And then I'm going to slip into major depression and not come back from it either. But this doesn't make sense, right? Again, if this is just a bad gene variant, then why is it still in our genome? What we get from Boyce and Ellis and from Belsky and from those other researchers is the differential susceptibility model. Biologically, evolutionarily, this makes way more sense. That what we have are the dandelions, these folks whose, thanks to their biology, are not remarkably influenced by the environment around them. They're hardy, they're dandelions. You can put them in a crack in the sidewalk, metaphorically, or in the best garden, metaphorically, and they're still just going to turn out who they are, right? They're going to unfold their potential and be who they are. This is more optimistic, right? Because this person is going to cope when put in a bad situation. Remember the book opened with resilience. Maybe these people, maybe those children who overcame those early life stressors, maybe they're dandelions. They're hardy. Now, of course, when we put them in a positive environment, they're not influenced by that either. They still are who they are, right? We don't see better outcomes for them. But the advantage is, in that bad environment, we don't see worse outcomes for them. Now, the red lines in this model, in the differential susceptibility, differentially susceptible to the environment. In this differential susceptibility model, these red folks, these plastic people, have genes that make them susceptible to the environment. These are our orchids. You put them in a crack in the sidewalk, they will fail to thrive. You put them in a bad childhood experience, they will fail to thrive. But this is positive because if we can put them in a good environment, look at this. Not only do they thrive, they exceed the dandelion children, right? They become our best and our brightest thinkers. This is, I love this framework. It fits with resilience, it fits with the flexibility and the endurance of humankind, and it also fits with evolutionary and biological science. Why would these variants still exist if they're bad? Well, they're not all bad. They're bad in certain environments, and maybe they're actually adaptive or good in other environments. So this differential susceptibility model really came on in the 2005, 2010, started to be popular, and we started to look for it. Because here's the thing, psychology sometimes has blinders on, and we only look over here, right? We only look at like problems and disorders, and if we're only looking at the bad side, then what we're always going to see is this risk model, where the gene is either a risk factor or it's not. Now, this theory came out, and we started to realize as a field, as behavior geneticists, like, hey, wait a minute, we need to look at positive adaptation too, to see if the genes really work this way, right? We have to measure this side. We have to measure good outcomes to see if the gene actually works this way, if it confers benefit. And here's some examples. So Jay Belsky is a big differential susceptibility guy. And so he looked at whether or not some genes on OPRM1, which again is just a gene that we don't really need to memorize the name of or care about a lot, but he said folks on OPRM1 either have this, they're the black line, which means they're the AA genotype, or they're the blue dotted line, which means they inherited a G, right? And this sort of, they inherited that protein from a parent. And he looked at maternal sensitivity as the environment, right? So, and 0 means average, right? So 0 is like average, an averagely sensitive parent, right? A parent who is averagely loving and warm and supportive. And as we move up into the positives, this becomes a parent who is high sensitive, high warmth. And as we move into the negatives, then this becomes a risk. And we know this. We know that maternal sensitivity, lack of maternal sensitivity, is a risk. If it was diathesis stress, you would just see this, right? Having a G and put in this at-risk environment, we see the children fail to thrive, right? So these are the children, again, with really cold parents. We see them having low levels of social competence. We see them having low levels of academic skills. They're not doing well. So they're not doing well with peers. They're not doing well academically. And the Woodcock-Johnson is an IQ test. They're also displaying lower IQs. So this looks like a risk gene. If you have this G variant on OPRM1. Belsky measured sensitivity the whole way up, though. Highly sensitive parents, and look what happens. This black line, these are dandelions. These black lines, they're not remarkably sensitive or influenced by the environment around them. They just keep on keeping on. These blue kids, the kids that inherit the G allele, in the bad environment, certainly they fail to thrive. But look at what happens to these blue kids in a good environment. They have more social competence than the dandelions. They have better academic skills, and they have a higher IQ. So it does appear that this is a gene that follows the differential susceptibility model. If you inherit the G, that means that your genes make you really vulnerable to the environment, for better or for worse.
So I go on to show other examples, but I think that's enough. I hope that was decent quality that you could hear it. I provide this to sort of show how I attempted to still engage students. I find this material really fun, really interesting, and I think that by personalizing it, by first providing the theoretical framework and context, and then giving concrete examples, that it will allow students to learn about and understand and retain the material. And so that is a look at how I have been handling the online class environment in the fall semester and the spring semester, attempting to highlight some of the changes that I have made to be a bit more organized, a bit better organized for the students, and to make it hopefully a bit more engaging in just sort of how I am presenting the material to the students. Thank you for watching.